Morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Prosperity and Livability Committee to order. I'm Wesley Hudson, Chairman, and present in City Hall is Councilperson Monica Peters and Councilmember Cyril Jefferson. I believe we have Michael Holmes remote as well. Our first order of business today is to discuss donation of a property to Washington Street for Cultural Arts Center, and I'll yield the floor to Phyllis Bridges for that. I'm sorry, I jumped. I'm sorry. I'm going to yield to staff first, if that's okay.
Each of you should have a packet of information that we handed out, and Michael, if you're on, we emailed you a packet also. The first sheet here is shows the property. This property on the left, you see on the far left, you see University Parkway. On the south, you see Washington Street. On the north, you see a row of houses that are I think were constructed by Habitat. And then on the east side, you have North Hopkins Street, also with a row of houses on it. On the property that's highlighted in the insert and bounded by the yellow line is what we're talking about today. It's a little over 4 acres, 4.15 acres. It is owned by the city and the housing authority. Legal is in the process of doing a review of the tax records. We are not sure they're totally accurate. So we don't know exactly how much of it is owned by the housing authority now and how much is owned by the city. But we feel comfortable that at least some of those tracts are owned by the housing authority. The remainder owned by the city. On the
Randy, I think we found so far just one, if what our research shows is correct. Only one of those
only one are owned by the housing authority.
is owned by the housing authority.
Okay. But you're still doing review.
Yes.
Okay. On the right-hand side of that property, you see what is 2 basins, and when we go to the next area, you'll see one right now is an access road coming into the property, and then the other is a water basin that was used for the old water plant that was across Washington Street and
Sorry, I am so sorry. Gosh, I didn't realize it was me. I am so sorry.
sorry, across Washington Street. There was an old water plant that is now out of service. And we're using that basin for landfilling of demolition material, which is inert material, not household garbage. It's concrete, asphalt, old soil, bad soil, that type of thing. And that is exactly what was used to fill up, as far as we know, the basin directly beside it where the access road is now. That at some point in the future, city may decide that want to turn that into some athletic fields, or it could probably be used for parking. I think it would be real questionable whether it could ever, a building could ever be built on it. Be up to an engineer. If you'll flip over to the next page of the packet, you'll see a 1970 aerial. It shows the 2 basins as it existed in 1970, and you can also see some houses that existed on those lots at that time. 2018 aerial is our most recent aerial, and that shows how the property exists today. The one basin towards the middle of the property is used as an access road, so you can get the heavy equipment in there to dump the construction debris into the larger of the 2 basins. The next few sheets, I had asked our city clerk's office to look back and find the most recent examples of the city making donations of property to nonprofits. And we have to go all the way back to 2002, and in 2002, there was 2 properties that were donated to nonprofits. One was the Macedonia Family Resource Center that was conveyed to the Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church, and you see attached to it some perpetual covenants and conditions that went along with that donation of property. And then the second property was for the Chavis YMCA branch that was donated to the Greater High Point YMCA Association. Both of these have reversion clauses attached to them, and I understand that is a condition of state law that there has to be a reversion clause. Anything beyond that is up to the city council. Any condition beyond that is up to the city council. If you flip back to the Macedonia conditions, you see they put 8 conditions in there that covered everything from how soon it'll be built, how large it'll be built, how it will be operated, how it will be insured, how it will be maintained, and what kind of programs and activities could be allowed in the facility. The YMCA has far fewer, in fact, almost no conditions associated with that donation other than the reversionary clause. And then the final page of the packet is just, we came looking at these past donations and talking internally, we came up with several considerations that the council may wish to put on this property, on conditions associated with this donation. And again, it's totally up to the city council, but you may want to set a specific construction schedule. You may want to talk about specifics in relation to specifications of construction, such as building size, number of parking places, et cetera. Set specific dates to begin operations, programming that you may want associated with the structure. You may want to set some specific maintenance requirements, insurance requirements. You may want to set some fundraising goals that may be achieved prior to the dedication or at some point associated with the dedication. Or you may want to look at some kind of professional study that would determine annual operating costs and the community's ability to support the operation. Those are just some of the things that we came up with as possible suggestions for council to consider. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Can you explain the difference in conveyance and just as an MOU? Because as I see both of these that we have done in the past, they're not the same. One is an MOU and the other is a quitclaim.
It is.
Quick deed.
Right, and there's a huge difference legally speaking, because one of those puts the grantee in possession of the property, the quitclaim deed does.
Quitclaim.
The MOU does not. A couple of things that I might add to the manager's report too that we found. One item is, of course, we'll be dealing with a nonprofit. We did check the Secretary of State's office, and they are active under the North Carolina regulations. Ms. Bridges would be the registered agent, of course. There will have to be title work done by outside real estate expert attorneys. Many of the properties, because there's a number, 8 to 10 properties, and they many of them go back to a deed that is about 45 pages long. I guess you guys know that usually deeds are like one and a half, 2 pages at the most. And they are all identified, those parcels in that deed are identified by meets and bounds, which means you have to have somebody actually go out there. We took some time, especially my legal assistant, who's really good at reading these things without going out there and doing the meets and bounds. And it's going to take some work, so I want to give everybody a heads up on that we'll have that expense, because you have to go through, and we weren't finding, for example, first thing, non-expert real estate attorneys, we start looking for things that we could recognize, like the street name, that sort of thing, and we were having a really hard time even finding that. So it's going to take some digging through all of those. This deed probably has a good 50 some or more parcels in it, maybe 60 or so. So somebody's going to have to go through all of that and determine which ones are these properties that we're talking about.
Is there an advantage, disadvantage to MOU quitclaim? I know that they both will have reversionary
As
clauses.
far as as far as the legal exposures that the city would be exposing itself to, for duplicative talk there, MOU, much more protection for the city. Again, like I just said, if you deed of any sort, even with the reversionary clause, et cetera, that puts the grantee in possession of property, and as you would expect, that gives them a much heavier hand in decision-making. And it's not, I guess, the old adage, possession is 9/10 of the law. There's a bit of a joke to that, but in this case, maybe that's a good way to phrase it, because, they've got possession, and then you would have to take legal action to get it back. The MOU in this case would be treated, whatever the requirements and specifications that you and council would determine, and according to what the manager has recommended, you could go ahead and set those out. You could be as specific as you wanted to. You could phase them. You could time them. I would compare that very much to the way that we do our incentive agreements, which are all performance-based, which protects the city. We don't have to have a clawback, which is kind of what those reversionary clauses are. You don't have to have a clawback. You hold on to what you've got, then you wait for the other party to perform. Once they've given you proof of that performance and completion, then you provide whatever it is that you're going to do, whether it's going to be manpower or funding or whatever.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, so it sounds like in the case of the quitclaim, there were more conditions. It sounds like in the case of the MOU with the YMCA, there weren't as many conditions. The quitclaim allows them to get possession quicker, as I understand it.
Right, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head of why they did it that way. And Randy and I just very briefly discussed it. The why, everyone knows that generally they are in the service of serving the public, and public purpose is pretty much rooted in the YMCA. The other one was with a church. Although it was a nonprofit, of course, we know that churches don't always serve the community as a whole. So that might have been the difference in that approach there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What I'm seeing, though, with the church getting the quitclaim, it also came with all the conditions, though. And the Y didn't get the quitclaim. They got the MOU that probably gave a little more, I think, maybe a little more mitigation of exposure to the city while not having as many conditions?
Perhaps not, because I think there was an assumption, oh, we're dealing with the Y, and they serve a public purpose anyway. They have that much in common with the city, unlike the church. I'm not sure why the decision was made. I think if we were handling it today, we would not have done the quitclaim with the church. We would have probably done an MOU and handled it that way, just to maintain, again, the exposure and control it.
Awesome. Can I ask a question? Have these been shared with Ms. Bridges? These?
I gave her the packet this morning.
Okay, so it's your first time seeing it? Because I imagine at a certain point, her and her team will have to look at these things to be able to respond with, I guess, their considerations for the considerations, and us be able to have a lot more discussion on it.
Well, I think, and this is certainly up to the committee, But I think to move this along, what you would need to make a recommendation to the full council, and then council would direct us to move forward with whatever. Because this committee can't make decisions, only the council can. So I think the next step is if you have support of the committee, then you move, see if there's support on the council, and then we can start checking the boxes of what needs to be done, working with Phyllis in a contract or an MOU or something of that nature to eventually get to something that would be approved by the council and then executed.
Right. Let me ask another question. To your point, Madam Attorney, you mentioned there's a number, there's just a number of hours that would have to be committed by the legal department. And it sounds, some of which, would we outsource some of that and bring in?
It would have to be because it's old. The actual deed is from 1978, and it's, like I said, a lot of meets and bounds. So somebody's going to have to go through this and determine which of those properties are included in here and confirm that. That was going to be, Councilmember Jefferson, you read my mind, because that was going to be my next comment and request of this committee, is if and when you forward this to the council as a whole, that's going to be my first step, and I'm sure Ms. Bridges wants to do the same thing. We've got to make sure that we have the right property, everything's identified, and we know what property we're working with.
So do you have an estimation of what it would cost us in legal fees maybe for this?
I have no idea. I wonder if I could even get that from an attorney. I haven't, we just started this last Thursday and started digging in, and so I haven't turned it over or even asked, but
Could the range be significant?
what is your definition of significant?
That is the most.
Well, so, I know. So in some ways, you know, there's these conditions that can go in, that say, all right, land's donated and here's conditions, but then prior to us even getting to the point of even executing an MOU, is thinking about all the investment of time that's
Well,
going
yeah,
to
because
go
you want to
into.
make sure that when they get the deed, I mean, we want to do this to protect them as well, and make sure it's a good deal, because they want to make sure that they're getting a good title to what we're offering. So that's got to be done at some point.
Yeah, I mean, so if you all hear what I'm saying, is that it's going to be a significant investment of time,
It
and
is.
especially where we're utilizing external personnel, it's going to be a significant investment.
I can't imagine, and, you know, we always work with Fox Rothschild. They give us a really good cut rate on our hourly rate. But not being a real estate attorney and looking at this, and like I said, usually my legal assistant can bring it much further along than this. You know, it doesn't have from where the good old cow used to stand to that point, but it's close, even though it was 1978.
So let me ask you, just Madam Attorney, so is this something the city really needs to do anyway? Because even if we had a developer that wanted to come purchase the property,
Yes.
we need to know all that.
It will definitely be something that has to
Okay.
be done. One of the things that we found, and this might be something we want to talk to the Housing Authority about, but see, the tax record is showing that the Housing Authority is the owner of some of the property. It appears that the Housing Authority has been paying the taxes on some of this property, even though this extremely lengthy convoluted deed is referenced when you go to the Register of Deeds office, and it says that the city received title and interest to the property in this, but the tax record is showing the Housing Authority.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to.
Well, let's hear
Okay.
from, if Ms. Bridges has anything to add, I would love to hear, if anything further.
Good morning, everyone. I would just like to introduce some of the people who are part of this project, who's ready to help make this happen, and of course, support from some of the business owners and organizations here in the city as well. On behalf of Visit High Point is Melanie Barnett, who would like to come up and say a few words. Also, John Seegers, who's with the Samet Corporation, and he has two of his team members who would like to answer any questions. And also Attorney Gerald Truesdale, who is here and representing my nonprofit organization. So, Melanie?
Good morning. As Ms. Bridges just noted, I'm Melody Burnett with Visit High Point, and I just want to come to speak on behalf of the ULEAKS Cultural Art African American Heritage Movement that is happening here in the community. And we've been working with her behind the scenes and haven't formally come out as a formal commitment in terms of monetary dollars, but you guys are aware of Visit High Point and our Drive High Point Foundation, and we've had a really long history with Ms. Bridges and several of her projects, whether it be ULEAKS Modern Art, whether that be Oakwood Cemetery, March on an All-American City. Most recently, we've committed dollars of the amount of $17,500 for an African American Heritage Trail and supporting marketing material. So, of course, her vision that she's put in place over 10 years ago would really support a lot of the supporting projects that she's put in place in the last 10 years, and of course the investments that we've made through Ms. Bridges and her vision. Most recently, I wanted to call attention of a situation I was in last month, putting together an itinerary for a digital influencer that came into town from Nashville, Tennessee. This is a young Black entrepreneur who's very hip, comes from an urban community, here with her mother, and this was a project in joint with Visit High Point and our local High Point EDC. And we were needing some digital content as this young lady had 58,000 followers on Facebook and Instagram, and we were building out an itinerary for her, not only throughout High Point, but Greensboro as well. And we felt like we had a lot of good stepping stones, but we were really missing that great attractor that would have really rounded out that itinerary for her. Luckily, we have some places like Sabrina's at the Gallery on Main. We have Unwind Cafe and some other notable attractors. Unfortunately, we didn't have the John Coltrane Festival in town. But 67% of our Black travelers are looking for those cultural and heritage opportunities. We know that 41% of them are willing to buy into any kind of locally owned Black business or attraction. And so the timing really is now for Phyllis's vision to really come to fruition. And even though we haven't made that formal commitment with her, we have that long-standing history with her, knowing that we want to support her in the long game in her vision and strategy as well. I won't go into all the other benefits of having that in the community. I've been around a long time and remember seeing lots of strategic plans for Washington Street, and just knowing that having that cultural arts center would really anchor that district and tie it in with our urban core. So if you have any other questions regarding tourism, I'm telling you, this is a tourism home run. The timing's now, so we just thank you guys for exploring this opportunity and taking it seriously so we can get a 2024 implementation really soon.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Burnett? Anyone else you'd like to talk, Ms. Bridges? Always glad to have Samet in the house.
And congrats, Johnny, on your most recent award, man.
Thank you.
Leaders in diversity, right?
Yeah, we have, man, our program inside, it's and they, always say they'll highlight me in those papers, but the diversity program is a whole process. It's me, it's Carl, it's our pre-con, it's in the leadership. It comes from the top down. Inclusion is difficult to build from the bottom up. It has to be heartfelt from the top and fluates down into the group. So thanks, Cyril, but that's why, my name is recognized a lot, but it's the team that's doing the work. Yeah.
Johnny's so humble, man. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. But so I'll say about maybe 2 years ago, Ms. Bridges or so, we got engaged with Phyllis to kind of create a design. John Drinkard is the design architect that's in our team. We've working on a design build agreement where the architect and Samet would be in a contract together to build the facility. And John's team put a huge effort in creating the renditions that maybe you guys have seen, some early programming. We were meeting pretty frequently with Ms. Bridges to get the vision on paper. Sam is, of course, here in the community. We have done a ton of work for the city, so it's an excellent opportunity for us to put the mission you see me putting also out in terms of our diversity program into a facility very similar to what she's looking for. So I personally toured the African American Arts Museum in DC that's part of the Smithsonian last week, and I was sharing some of those things with Ms. Bridges too, that John's team would also have a component to. There's an influencer that we would use as well that brings the African American piece into the facility. That's kind of our end. We're extremely excited about it, to build it, show it here, and be on the team with her. She has been extremely helpful in putting in her head what we've got on paper. So it's exciting. We hope we can build it. Give John a chance to.
And I will say, this is Phyllis's vision. She's had this for quite a while. It's awe-inspiring. And we assembled a team of Shred Team together to come together and work with Phyllis and her board to understand what she's trying to create within this community and draw upon this community. And the goal behind this is create an iconic building for this environment, but truly it's what's inside the building that is what it's all about. And I really commend Phyllis and the vision that she's had on this.
Absolutely.
So
I
anything
love
we
the
can
building
share, we
buildings.
can. Anything we need, we can give you guys to help provide that she may need, that we need to show at a presentation. Carl really got in the weeds. He was the estimator behind how we think the job would cost and come out. So any questions that he has, he could help too, so.
Yeah, can we hear that number one more time? I know Phyllis has shared it, but the estimated cost to construct the project.
Around 32 million.
Yeah, Phyllis's presentation was fabulous. I mean, your vision and the building, the architectural elements of it is just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, it looks great, yeah.
Jim and High Point.
The flow inside the building is a spectacular building.
Well,
Can you
again,
give a-
I contribute that to Phyllis's vision. Really, we worked a year on it, bringing it to fruition to this point, so.
Beautiful. Can you give a timeline from groundbreaking to opening?
Ooh, I would say once we got to go ahead, it's probably a year in pre-con, 18 months or so, to build the facility once we get out of the pre-construction component.
Any other questions from anyone? If not, as I understand what the next step is for us to give it to full council, that we're not presenting a full package to council. It moves to council next with our recommendations. So I'll entertain, if you want the motion, I'll
Okay.
happy to
Yeah.
entertain.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to take this to full council with a favorable recommendation for staff to continue working on figuring out the best way to do this with the MOU and to assess the land and make sure that, so is that enough? Y'all got it? Okay.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the floor? If not, let me explain. This is a new way that we're voting. Since July 1st, we're back in person. Even though we do have a remote member, the remote members do not count as present. They don't count to make a quorum. They can listen, but they do not get a vote. So the 3 members present are the only ones that will vote. So if there's no further discussion, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries 3-0. Thank you all so much.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to present something to the community members.
Certainly.
For any financial support. I have a couple of letters here, if you would like to.
Can you pass it through the table here first so that we can make sure that we're... Just one for the record.
Yeah, no. Make sure council gets it first. I'll get a copy later.
Thank you. Thank you. So great. If there's no further questions on this or further discussion, our next item is a discussion from Forward High Point. Staff's going to give us a presentation.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, as you know, Ray Gibbs from Forward High Point has requested that the series of 8 concerts that they are producing at the ballpark be considered for special event funding. Your policy, under the special event policy that City Council has adopted, this would be considered a co-sponsored event based on what Mr. Gibbs has presented. There are 8 concerts being planned in between July and October outside the gates of the stadium, as well as a number of other events that he mentions in his memo. And so he is asking for, I believe, in-kind donations to help these events be produced.
Questions from the floor? I think we're all very familiar with the process, and he's talked to us about this.
Yeah, remind me, this is, sorry, I was,
So you're talking about like stage, cones, barricades?
I believe
What all would it entail?
It will also entail police.
it would also entail
Police security is actually
police
what they
security,
physically will be paying is for that.
barricades, and another, and the stage as well.
is Ray here to speak virtually or not, or a representation from Fort High Point?
I thought he would be, but I guess he's not.
Did Ray know we had a meeting today?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did Ray or Chairman Bensini know we had a meeting today to hear this?
I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not they knew that we were starting this with the committee or not.
So, okay. So I'll tell you why I asked about them being here is because I've got questions for them. Not that this isn't something that we want to support. I think everyone knows that this council has been fully committed to supporting downtown revitalization, and clearly events that bring folks downtown fully aligns with that mission. I think everyone also knows that as council members, being stewards of the public trust and making key decisions about how tax revenue is spent means that we've got to do our due diligence and ask some various questions. And I don't even think we have the opportunity to ask questions at this point. And so I'm kind of perplexed about them not being here. So I want to be clear that where I stand right now is I want to support it, but I just feel like, how are we being responsible council members without asking those questions to the entity that's asking us for something that could cost us as much as $50,000? And that just, I don't know. I mean, do we normally give $50,000 without asking questions first?
Or do we even have numbers? Do we have some numbers?
We don't have numbers.
Okay.
We don't have to my knowledge, we don't have a scope and scale of what exactly the request is. We know the number of events, but we don't know what the scale of the event is. We have met with Ray, and a team of city members met on site to discuss exactly where barricades would be, where police officers would need to be, but I don't have a detailed list of exactly of what it encompasses and what the dollar amount would be,
Okay.
the dollar amount of the in-kind service.
Have they contacted Parks and Rec to see if the stage is available?
Yes.
For those days? Okay, great. So, did anybody from Forward High Point know that it was going on the P&L agenda? Okay.
I'm not sure. Greg has been talking to Ray, and he's on a conference call with NCDOT on the Greenway grant thing.
Okay.
So I
Okay,
honestly
okay.
don't know the answer to that question right now.
How many police officers would be estimated per event?
Like I said, I don't know exactly. There was some discussion about it. Some of the events, these 8 concerts are on Gatewood, so there would need to be, from what we were told, there would need to be one at each barricade, which I believe there's
Okay.
3 barricades. But I don't know if that's just the full number
Right.
of,
Because I'm super okay with the stage, barricades, any kind, amount of cones that they would need. But I would think that another sponsor should actually pay for the police, because we know that our police officers are short-staffed, and I just don't think it would look good for the city to pay for police when we're short-staffed. So I think that maybe they could get another sponsor to cover that expense. It doesn't seem like if there's only 2 officers, it would be that much for 2 hours.
yeah, typically it's I believe $28 an hour, which
Yeah.
that event would probably, these 2-hour events, you'd probably require 3 to 4 hours.
Right, because they've received sponsorships from
Correct.
folks. So
Yeah.
they are a partner, so I mean, you know.
I'll tell you all what my thoughts are. I don't think anyone in this room can maybe answer it as well as representatives from Fort High Point could. But I think that, I mean, again, downtown investment, I think we're all gung-ho about that. And when I think about what makes downtown work, it's not just the buildings that we construct, but it's the feeling, the environment, the ecosystem that we create that brings folks downtown. And so events such as this clearly meet in that equation so long as they're able to attract a crowd that is fully representative of our entire city. So that way, when folks say, is this worth the investment of taxpayer dollars, we can say yes, because it works in the full interest of our city. And I think right now, my questions that I have for the Executive Director, Ray Gibbs, and Chairman Bill Vincini, or whoever else is here, it's just questions around the planning process for these events. So that way, again, I mean, we're gonna get the phone calls around $50,000 being given to someone, and at this point, to make a recommendation and then answer those phone calls, I couldn't answer any one of them with any clear, concrete answers. I couldn't say who's planning, I couldn't say how we know we'll get a good crowd. To this point, I mean, our hope is that they'll get a good crowd down there and that it'll be representative of our entire city, but at this point, no one's here to answer those questions. And so my thinking, Chairman Hudson, is that I think it's worth being heard by the entire council, and maybe then we'll get Fort High Point personnel if they're in town and able to attend at that time. That would be great to ask them these questions here. Obviously, all we can do is make a recommendation. I would certainly make the recommendation that it be heard by council, but I don't know if I'm making the recommendation that we approve the funding. I just feel like it's too early to say that. I feel like we're not responsible council members to make a recommendation to approve funding. But I do, if I could make a motion, I would make the motion that this be heard by the full council at our next available time, so that way we can get Fort High Point personnel in here. Can I make the motion that way?
Can I say?
So it's not a favorable recommendation for the funding, it's a recommendation to be heard by council, the full council, to get it on the agenda.
Are you okay with doing that at the next manager's briefing before the 19th meeting?
That is perfect. And what I also understand is they have a short timeline, right? I think these events are set to start when?
July 17th is the first event, which is 2 days before the next city council
Yeah,
meeting.
so, I mean, heck, we couldn't approve the funding before the first event anyways. I kind of would have loved to have heard this about a month or 2 ago, that just FYI for the record. But I think we're caught in a situation now in which Fort High Point, who has been, if I can use the term partner, of the city and what we're doing with downtown revitalization, we want to support what they're doing. We want to support events going on down there. We want to be fully involved in what's going on. But I think that School of Government in my first few weeks on council just said, hey, we've got to ask questions. And I don't think it's our job to make votes on funding without asking questions. I mean, I'm curious about the marketing being spent on this. Do they have funding committed to that, to ensure that we're not just going to have the usual groups there? I mean, I'll be there with my kids, but anyone north of 311 going to be in attendance? I mean, and we can all make assumptions all we want, but we can't ask the questions of the people who can give us the answers. And so my motion is that we hear it at the manager's briefing, and that we've got to have, I would say we need to have Ray Gibbs here. If Bill Vincini wants to be here or someone else from the board, that's great, but I just think we need to ask questions.
We would need, I'm sorry, we would actually need to include it to be included on the agenda for that meeting, correct?
It depends on whether or not you're going to take action up here report from the managers.
Okay, but we can still put it on the agenda.
You can always hear the presentation at the manager's briefing, and then if you wish to add it to the agenda that night, you certainly can do
Right,
that.
okay, all right. So there is a motion. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Okay, and the motion is to take,
To hear it at the manager's briefing,
okay, and the manager's briefing is when, the 19th?
yes, it's our next council meeting is on the 19th.
Okay, well, the only thing is, they've got the one event on the 17th.
Even if we voted in favor of funding, we can't give them the funding as a committee. All we can do is make a recommendation to council to.
Okay, but
Well-
can we, like, if we take the stage and the barricades and the cones, can we hold off billing them for that until council votes on the 19th?
Well, under the policy, if it is a co-sponsored event, there's not necessarily a bill, it's an in-kind service.
Right,
So it
okay.
depends on how you want, under the policy, how you want to, which category you choose to put these events in.
In layman terms, you're saying if we wanted to, we could approve right here today to support the events?
No, I'm suggesting that,
Oh, definitely good.
It has to go to full council regardless. And the next full council meeting is on July 19th.
But we could make a positive recommendation to be an in-kind sponsor, I believe, is that correct?
It'll still go to the board.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, but we either say favorable, unfavorable, or no favor. So we can
Right,
still
my-
make a favorable motion for in-kind sponsorship.
Understood. My motion is not in
Okay,
favorable
okay,
recommendation.
okay.
My motion is that we hear, I want to see the events.
Right. Unless
I
we
mean,
call this-
am I tripping here that I just don't think we can say we want to support an event without asking questions? I think it's our job to ask the questions. We don't do nothing else. We got to ask questions and then vote. So that's all I'm saying is give us a chance to ask questions for High Point, please.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table. On the
Yeah.
floor. Is there a second?
Second.
To that? There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So that will be at the next briefing. So yeah, unfortunately, the 17th is just not, that one's not possible, but we can get that one in the timeline.
And to be clear, for the record, I think regardless of the recommendation or motion that was made today, there was nothing this body could have done to support that event in time for the 17th because the next council meeting is on the 19th. So for the record, this should have been brought to us much sooner. We're not going to shame them for not doing it, but we just want to make sure, as long as everyone's adding 2 + 2, there was no way we could have left today supporting the event on the 17th. So they should have sent the letter a month ago, or 2 months ago, preferably.
If there is nothing further to come, this meeting is adjourned.